Hey guys, what's going on? It's Gale here, back with 59 Gaming, and today I've got with me Prof Sen.
Hey everybody.
And today we're going to be talking about Child, aka Tartaglia, the newest addition in Genshin Impact, of course. For those of you who don't know, he's the recent addition to the 1.1 update, and his banner is currently live. So we thought we'll do a showcase over on the channel today. We're going to be talking about his skills, his passives, his constellations, and of course your ideal builds for him, potential like decisions you should make when you're deciding what artifacts to run for him, what weapons to use for him, and whether it's worth summoning for him or not. So let's quickly start with his bow, his elemental skill, and of course his elemental burst. So we'll start off with his just general charged attack slash normal attack. So he starts off very basic. He's a bow user, so he has the usual normal attack and charged attack. But his one special thing about his charged attack is that he applies the Riptide status. Now, the Riptide status basically allows you to basically cause consistent damage on the enemy. It's sort of like a tick damage. And once you go into your elemental skill, which is basically him switching stances, he whips out basically some knives made of water, and he basically goes into this melee stance. So he stops using his bow, so you can get in close, attack the enemy. And this also takes advantage of the Riptide status. It allows him to do extra hydro damage, and a special thing about him is that one of his passives, once you reach Ascension rank 4, is that the Riptide effect is applied via the melee stance as well if you do crit damage, which is really good because the Riptide damage allows you to just make sure that the enemies are consistently getting a bit of hydro tick damage, allowing you to switch in between characters and do elemental reactions. What are your thoughts, Prof Sen, on his kit so far?
I think it's really fun. I played through the trial run. I really liked how smooth he felt. He didn't feel well, most of the bow users kind of felt clunky to me. I play a lot of Venti and it just kind of felt like shifting in and out, but he really did feel like his transition between kilts felt right. His damage felt really fun too. I hear a lot of people saying it's not quite there, but I had a lot of fun with him. I'm really looking forward to pulling him now. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he works on teams going forward. I know a bunch of my friends are going for him right now as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I noticed as well, the test run didn't really do a great job of showing his case because of the fact that we do get like very generic sets. I think Braveheart's the set we get for these units when we go into these test runs. So it's not a really good example of them. I personally tried him out via the test run as well as the story quest that he has at AR40. And the set they give him at AR40, which is basically a Skyward Harp and Nobody's Obliged, makes him a lot better. But we'll come on to that in a second. His elemental burst is effectively this is one of the best things about him in my personal opinion, is that his elemental burst allows him to effectively have two different ultimates for both of his stances effectively. So he'll do a separate thing for his bow stance, and then when you switch into his melee stance, he'll have a different thing entirely. So when you're in his bow stance, he basically deals hydro damage and applies Riptide status, and then after you use it, you can get some of the energy cost back, so it'll allow you to immediately recharge for the next one. The second one, which is his melee stance ultimate or his burst damage, it creates a large AoE slash attack, dealing massive hydro damage to all surrounding opponents, as well as triggering Riptide Blast, which basically triggers a sort of hydro explosion, dealing hydro damage, which again is really good for elemental reactions. This damage that you do deal with Riptide Blast is also elemental burst damage. So really, really unique in its way. What do you think about the fact that we have two different ultimates for one character, Prof?
I kind of expected stuff like this to start happening even when I just saw the trailers of the game, so I'm not surprised. I'm really excited to see where they go with this. Like, obviously we've already seen by now that this character is going to wield two elements at some point, so maybe we'll even get characters that start popping off new elements where they're all combo and shifting between that.
No, for
So
sure. I mean, the one thing is, it's a bit of spoilers, but there's something that happens in the story that is very interesting regarding the traveler. So if you haven't already gotten to that part in the story, be sure to get to it. You'll notice something really, really sick, which leads to a whole realm of possibilities. But I'm not gonna spoil that, of course, today. That's not my job. So quickly running through his passives. Effectively, his first passive, which he unlocks at Ascension 1, is that it extends Riptide's duration by 8 seconds, which is super awesome. At Ascension 4, like I mentioned earlier on, it allows him to effectively apply Riptide status in his melee stance whenever he does crit damage via normal or charged attacks. And then finally, which is something that's unlocked automatically, is that it allows your party members' normal attacks level. So if you go into your talents, you see that normal attacks have a level scale. It allows it to increase by 1 automatically. So your party members automatically become stronger because he's on the party straight up. So that's really good on his end. Finally, just running through the constellations before we move into potential builds and stuff like that, is that his first constellation decreases the cooldown of his melee stance by 20%, so you can quickly switch in. His second constellation is that when opponents affected by Riptide are defeated, he regenerates 4 elemental energy, which allows him to get his elemental burst up and running quicker. His third constellation increases the level of his melee stance by 3. His fourth constellation, which is a lot longer, effectively, is it triggers Riptide Slash against opponents on the field affected by Riptide every 4 seconds, otherwise triggers Riptide Flash. Riptide slashes and Riptide flashes triggered by the constellation aren't affected by the time interval that would typically apply to the two Riptide statuses. So they don't have any cooldown or anything of that sort that usually they would encounter when you get to this constellation. At Constellation 5, which is his fifth dupe, or sixth dupe technically, or sixth copy you get, is that it increases the level of his ultimate by 3. And finally, his final constellation, which is his max dupe, will effectively reset the cooldown of the melee stance when you do his ultimate in the melee stance. So effectively, you are resetting his cooldown once you do his melee ultimate again, so you can immediately go back into melee mode right after, which is really sick. What do you think about these constellations, Prof? Do you think they're a bit powerful? Do you think people should go for them if they're whaling? What are your thoughts?
I think especially the final constellation really defines the character. It's gonna just keep opening more and more and more doors for him. If you just want to grab a copy of him, and you mentioned one of his earlier talents, the buff everybody's normal attack, I can definitely see him with endless bench potential for that. So you only need one copy of that, so maybe you want to just grab one copy and go. But if you plan on fighting with this guy, and you're the kind of guy to go all in, I'd say this is the time to do it, because you definitely need to grab that C6 ability to have the endless cooldown on his ultimate. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the constellations are quite unique in its regards, and it helps out his melee stance a lot, from what I can tell. Nothing too crazy in terms of his ultimate or his, basic attacks, but it's all focused around his melee attacks. Speaking of, we move into his weapons and builds. Do you have any recommendations yourself, Prof, of any weapons that you might think is good for him, especially 5-star weapons?
Well, I mean, I would say the best in slot weapon right now for him is going to be the Skyward Harp, if you've gotten your hands on that. We've also have a banner live right now if you want to hit that banner if you've already pulled the character. And then if you're going for maybe a 4-star option, I would maybe look at Rust or the Stringless. Those two have been speaking to me as good options for him. How do you feel?
No, for sure. I think the biggest thing about him right now for me is, like, you look at his options, and because we don't this is something that we will tackle in just a second, of course. But one thing that we have noticed, of course, is that we're missing two elemental damage sets in artifacts, Cryo and Hydro. So you want to rely on his elemental skills and elemental damage a lot more. And then on top of that, you want to ensure he's going to be getting a lot of crit damage out, because of course his melee stance applies Riptide at every crit hit, effectively, when you get to his Ascension rank 4 for his passive. So the Skyward Harp, like Prof mentioned, is probably your best option, because it gives crit rate as its main substat, or its substat, I should say, and then increases crit damage as well. So you can pretty much scale up his crit chance to 100%, let him crit like 10 out of 10 times, and then do some massive damage by just bolstering his crit damage set, or crit damage percentage, I should say. But yeah, you're not wrong. I think that Rust and Stringless are very good secondary options for 4-star weapons. One thing that I will say, if you're looking for a very budget option, in my opinion, something that you could potentially look into is probably something along the lines of what is the Raven's Bow, which is basically a it increases damage against enemies affected by Hydro or Pyro by a certain percentage depending on the refinement, which is really good, especially because when you're with Tartaglia, you're gonna have pretty much a 100% uptime of enemies being affected by Hydro because he's gonna just be watermarking like every unit on the field. So, what are your thoughts on that one? Is that a good budget option?
Oh, definitely. That is a 3-star bow, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty much
Yep.
everybody's going to be able to get a hold of it. You're going to be able to max refine it. And if maybe you're already, let's say you even have the string list or something like that, you can keep that on your official or something else. And this is still a perfectly viable option for your child, Tartaglia, or whatever you want to call him. No, it's a lot of people underplay the 3-star weapons, but I think that is definitely you'll get the job done if you would with that done.
No, for sure. I think this is it's a good option, like you mentioned. As I said, it's a budget option. It's why I've been calling it that. It's a super budget option, effectively. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the weapons, and obviously Prof's thoughts on the weapons of choice. I think we're kind of in line with what we see from what we want from Child. Obviously, you do have other 5-star bows like the Amos bow. Well, it's the only other bow available. But the problem with the Amos bow is that it's more so reliant on increasing damage from your arrows. And because you're going to be running him like, I'd say a 50-50 time, sort of thing where 50% of the time you're going to be in his bow mode, 50% of the time you're going to be in his melee mode, or depending on how you rock him, maybe more so in the melee side, it's not as good for him personally. So that's our reasoning as to why we wouldn't recommend the Amos bow, quite frankly speaking. But we move into the artifact sets. Now, this is where things get a lot interesting. As I mentioned, in the story quest that you run with him, he's given the Noblesse Oblige set to be run with, whereas in the test run, you're given Braveheart, which is, the generic set. It's not really that great. Now, for me personally, what I would recommend people go with is potentially sort of like a 2 and 2, maybe like a 2 Wanderer's Trope, 2 a Noblesse Oblige, or maybe a 4 Noblesse Oblige, because you're going to be wanting to get his elemental burst damage out as much as possible as well. But at the same time, you're going to want his elemental mastery to be quite relatively high because you're going to be using a lot of elemental attacks. So those are my personal choices. What are your choices for his build, Prof?
So I don't actually digress on that at all. I think that the Noblesse Oblige 2-piece and Wanderer's Trope 2-piece is probably going to be your best option right now. The 5-piece sets are coming. We don't know exactly what they do yet. And with the Hydro set isn't even in the game. So my personal recommendation, as of the timestamp, keep in mind this is the 11th. This is the first day of the patch, right?
Yep,
That
exactly.
um, I wouldn't go too crazy on min-maxing his artifacts right now. If you got a kind of decent Noblesse Oblige, you Wanderer's Trope, which you probably got from just doing your wolf and your dragon bosses, then I could say you could sit on those, hunt your bow, and kind of work on your other characters until the Hydro set comes out or the 5-piece set comes out. Because there's not one that really speaks too much to just this is his best set. These just seem to work well with him right now.
No, for sure. I think the one thing that we also have to mention is that, as you mentioned, well, you mentioned it already, is that this is the first day, so we don't exactly know his like ideal sets and 100% on his main stats, substats. What's the best way to go about it? Personally, I would say make sure he gets 100% crit chance either via the artifacts or his weapon. Because again, like I said, you want to have that 100% uptime of him having crit damage out of his rear basically, and then effectively just throw in a lot of crit damage maybe, or bolster the attack percent. It's either one of the two you want realistically as a main stat on your artifacts. But yeah, it seems like we're in agreement with what we want to run on him. As mentioned, the hydro damage set I think maybe in the future might be a better option for him, but I think for the time being, we got to run with what we have basically, and I think those are the two best options we've got right now, is the Noblesse Oblige and Wanderer's Stroke. With that being said, those are our thoughts on him, our builds for him, our potential like best case scenario builds for him for what we think he from based on what he looks like, what we've run with him in the game during the test run or in the story quest. Now we should move on to whether you should summon for him. Prof, what do you think? Let's start off with you first.
Okay, so I'm I'm a sucker for style points, and I love how unique this character is. Fiona is also brand new, and she's on the banner. So if you're not going to look at any of the numbers, and you're going to look at a character that is uniquely fun to play and brand new to the game, I'd say go for it. Now, you might dissent on me there, holding out for, I believe we have Zhongli right around the corner. So you got to pick and choose if you're free to play. I feel that, but try this character out in the trial run. You'll see what I'm talking about. He feels like he's skating around the map and just go back into melee mode, keep slapping your enemy. I had a ton of fun. I was not expecting it.
I completely agree. I think I went into his banner very negatively initially. I was very, very hesitant on recommending people summon on him. I've been personally waiting for Ayaka and Xiao. I'm not even summoning for Zhongli, but I will admit I was wrong. I think he's a lot better than I gave him credit for initially. I think, especially as a water marker, we mentioned this even in the 5-9 gaming live stream we did in for over on Twitch. Check us out over on Twitch, by the way. Link down below in the description. But on a real though, we mentioned it that when we start getting more of these 5 sets, once we start getting when you run 2 Hydro units on the same team, the damage bonuses you get, and so on. Tartaglia isn't as bad as I initially thought he might be. I think especially if you put on the right sets down the line, you do that min maxing down the line. I think he's gonna be a real shining light. Now would I recommend summoning for him? I'm honestly his banner isn't really that bad at all. To be honest, you've got Tartaglia, Diona, as Prof mentioned. You've got Baido. You've got Ningguang, who's really solid. All 4 units are really solid in their own right. So it's hard not to recommend summoning on this banner. I think it's more so it comes down to whether you like him as a character or not. Plus, if you like his playstyle, and this is what I recommend always, is like do the test runs. It's a great recommendation of a way to go. In terms of whether you like using that character or not, and especially in Genshin, the way the game works, you want to just test run a lot and suit your playstyle more often than is it a good unit or not, realistically. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Summon if you like him. Summon if you really are interested in his kit. If you enjoyed the story, then maybe you enjoyed his character and you want to summon for him, go for it. But again, there are a lot of characters yet to come. I think a lot of characters people have been waiting for: Zhongli, Xiao, Ayaka, Ganyu, and so on and so forth. But yeah, any thoughts? Any final thoughts you have for us, Prof?
No, I think you wrapped it up. I think the only hesitancy that I would ever stress is we've already been given some kind of previews of Zhongli. Check them out before you summon. If you like what you see on Child, I just pull the trigger. It's a cool banner, and good luck.
Oh no, for sure. But yeah, thank you all for watching once again. We will be doing this again for potentially Zhongli. Well, no, we'll definitely be doing this for Zhongli down the line. So hit that subscribe button for more Genshin content. And of course, we will be back with the podcast over on Twitch on Monday. So check the link down below for Twitch down below. Follow us on all our social medias. There we go. Got there in the end. Struggled a bit, but follow us on all our social medias. The Discord link will be down below. The Twitter link will be down below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It's been Prof and Gale. We'll see y'all next time. Thank you so much for watching.